Okay, so the point is as follows. Let's just summarize. So the pasuk says that at the very last pasuk of the Megillah that Mordechai was rotzoi, was in favor with the majority of his brothers, the seeker of peace for all his people. That's how it concludes. So what is meant by that he was favored by the majority of his brothers? Who were his brothers? It says brothers, and then it concludes with all his people. So what's the distinction? All his people, of course, are all the Jewish people. He sought out their welfare and ensured their welfare. Brothers refers to his colleagues. Who are his colleagues? His colleagues are his fellow members of the Sanhedrin, of which he was a member. So he was only popular with the majority. The minority were not pleased, as it were, separated from him. Why did the minority separate from him? Because even after the Purim story, he remained in government, rather than devoting himself exclusively to Torah study. So we had a number of questions. The questions were, usually when there's a dispute between the minority and the majority, so the majority convinces the minority of their position. Why didn't this happen here? Furthermore, if we look at the language of the Gemara, and this actually is a key to understanding the whole story here, it doesn't say that the minority argued with him or even disagreed. It doesn't say that. It says only they separated themselves from him. They took a different path, but at the same time, that implies validating his. Only this minority, the Sanhedrin said, not for us. That's a key. And that's why, explains another nuance, without repeating the whole detail, but in the record of the returnees from, of the record rather of the exiles. So in one record, Mordechai is mentioned number 5, and then later is mentioned number 6. He's demoted one place as the 6th sage. Post Purim, he's still part of the list, but only demoted one rung to reflect the fact, we'll explain at the end, that even though here, the other side of the coin, the majority agreed with him, but at the end of the day, from the perspective of the Sanhedrin, as we'll explain, there is something lesser, necessary, but lesser nonetheless. So let's resolve it all by explaining again that there's no argument. The minority did not argue with him, they separated from him. And we explained this all rooted, we told the story of the Rogachover, who declined to be a member of a committee, the working committee that the previous Rebbe had established. He said, it's not for me. And explained this is all dependent on an argument between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. Let's use the Hebrew terms, Bavli and Yerushalmi. And what's the argument? The argument, or the quote-unquote argument, is also not an argument, it's a different level, 2 different levels. Namely, they both talk about the fact that the pious, the early Hasidim, we're talking Talmudic Hasidim, would daven for 9 hours a day. So both Talmuds ask, what happens to their Torah study? But they give slightly different answers. The Bavli says their Torah study is preserved. And the Rishalmi says the Torah study is blessed. And it's very different. Mishtameres or Mizbareches. So Mishtameres means whatever they learned, they remembered. But there's no particular blessing in their learning. But the Rishalmi says their learning was blessed, which means that in the small amount of time that they learned, their discovery was the same and insightfulness as someone who was not pious, who would spend a much longer time. And so here and therefore lies the distinction. Now let's get to the actual Sanhedrin of which Mordechai was a member. Now, the Rebbe goes in a lot of detail here, and it needs a lot of understanding of history and a lot of detail. I'll just give you the bottom line. The bottom line is that the Sanhedrin is predominantly sages from Yerushalayim, from Israel. So therefore, it makes sense that the majority of the sages would agree with Mordechai. Even though he's devoting extraordinary amount of time to communal work, his Torah study is not diminished because not only is it preserved, but it's blessed. But there's a minority of the sages, and it's a whole lot of history here, that came from Babylon. Because this is already 70 years after the sages, the original sages from Jerusalem had been. It's a long story, but the sages from Jerusalem, the Gemara says, there were two exiles under Nebuchadnezzar. In the first exile, the sages were exiled, many of them, to Babylon. And they were still alive when the second exile happened, which was after the destruction of the temple, of the Beis HaMikdash. Which meant that these sages from Israel still taught, they were able to teach the exiles that were coming now after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, which means that the influence of the Israeli sages, which is quote unquote, Jerusalem Talmud, was very present. But this is already 72 years later. This is much later, meaning to say that the influence of the Jerusalem sages has waned, and there's a new genre of Babylonian sages that are joining the Sanhedrin, that are coming back now after the story of Purim to Israel, but they're bringing with them the Babylonian mindset or level of learning. But they're a minority. The majority still, it needs a lot of history to understand this properly, but you get the general idea. The fact is that the majority in the time of Mordechai, the majority of the Sanhedrin would have been of the Jerusalem ilk, and a minority coming back from Babylon would have been already of the Babylonian Talmud's mindset and level of study, which is a lower level. And so that's the reason that a minority of the Sanhedrin parted. They said, it's not for us. You can do this. You can be a member of the Sanhedrin, at the same time, you can be involved so heavily in community affairs. But for us to remain in the Sanhedrin is the supreme Torah body, we can't do this. We have to devote ourselves exclusively to Torah study, because our Torah, if we would do what you're doing, would only be preserved but not blessed. You have the blessing that it's blessed. You follow? You're clear? That's the answer, the essential answer. Now I just want to tell you the end of this talk. That also explains why he was still demoted one level. He was demoted one level because even though what he did was totally justified and the majority were for him, but the sages still needed to convey the message that the Sanhedrin has to be a body that's exclusively devoted to Torah study. So he'd asked, if he fell out of favor, he should be off the list altogether. He's not off the list, God forbid. Just demoted one rung because a Sanhedrin, to be a member of the Sanhedrin and to give rulings in Torah and so on, the devotion has to be exclusively to Torah study, even though what he did was justified, but to convey the message that our thing is Torah, he was devoted, not removed from the list, just one rung. Now the conclusion, however, is this. The conclusion is Rabbi asked a question here. At the end of the day, the Sanhedrin, these are the great sages of the Torah. To the great Torah sages that we said that when a Sanhedrin, the only time a Sanhedrin, I didn't say this, a Sanhedrin can rule on matters of life and death is only if they are sitting in their place in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim, in the Beis HaMikdash, which means that exclusive Torah study, if they leave, they go out and they're busy with other things, then they're compromising the Sanhedrin state. So the question is kind of like this. Okay, Mordechai did what you have to do. Your Torah is going to be blessed, but you're not a member of the Sanhedrin anymore because these are the exclusive Torah sages, not community activists. Now, fine, it has to be done. And the majority agree. But why is he still a member of the Sanhedrin? It's a very subtle kind of question, but it needs to be addressed. And the answer is this. And here's the conclusion that you might expect from our Rebbe. Listen to his words. It says in Tana Devei Eliyah, that's a kind of a medrash. The Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin, what they should have done, it's critical of them. Tie, listen to this, chains of iron around their loins and lift up their long flowing garments above their ankles so they can mobility and go around all of the towns and cities of Israel and teach Torah. This is from our sages. Even though doing so, you cannot at that same time be ruling on points of law. But we see from here that at the end of the day, the whole point of being immersed in Torah study is for what? It's for the people. It's all in order for the people. So this quote that I just told you is speaking at a time when there's a dearth, a need of teachers throughout the country. So the Sanhedrin has to temporarily kind of not dissolve, but not sit in their chambers in Jerusalem and go around and teach Aleph Beis, because that's the call of the hour. And that's the answer to Mordechai. The call of the hour is he had to be still on guard. The situation was still somewhat precarious. The king had affixed his signature ring to a total annihilation of the Jews. He's obviously not a great Jew lover, despite the fact he allowed the Jews to defend themselves. He still had to be very much on guard. Moreover, the Rebbe concludes and says, looking at this is our generation. He's saying that our generation, he's calling, this is an appeal to the rabbis and the teachers, the sages of our generation. And he says that the previous Rebbe was the example himself. I wouldn't talk about himself, but the previous Rebbe took away from his time for his own Torah study and his own service of God to devote himself to the people, saving lives physically and spiritually, and demanded this from his followers, his Hasidim. And he instituted that. You all know this. The Chabad boys in yeshiva, where on the one hand, during the yeshiva period, that's the time where you're on the Sanhedrin in your own life. That's your Torah study life. No, the yeshiva boys in their time off and in lunchtime and on Fridays and on Chol HaMoed and on the summer. What happens to the yeshiva boys in this time? So that's the time they do their laundry and whatever they do. They play sports. Fine. But the previous Rebbe, now Rebbe changed that whole thing dramatically. And the yeshiva bach, even though on the one hand he's like a Sanhedrin, it's a Sanhedrin part of his life, during these times he has to go out there and knock on doors and meet Jews and put on tefillin and run summer camps and go all over the world, etc. That's part and parcel of the Chabad Yeshiva Bacha's life. Because this is the call of the hour. This is exactly what Mordechai did. And the story of Purim is the enduring story. That seems to imply that maybe not everybody should do this. The truth is, Rebbe doesn't say, I'm going to say this. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a Satmar Chassid once, many years ago. And he said to me, you think that we wouldn't want to do it, the Satmar Rebbe wouldn't want to do what the Lubavitcher Rebbe did, and send his Hasidim all over the world, in Mekar of Jews. He's a great leader and loves every Jew, and he did. He says, but he can't do that. He says, the Lubavitcher Rebbe has broad shoulders, as it were, took it upon himself to do it. I can't do this. Because if I send my Chassidim to God-forsaken places and no infrastructure, there's no cheder, there's no yeshiva, there's no pizza shop. Didn't say that. That's it. They'll assimilate. They need to have a very strong infrastructure support system. Can't send a young couple out into whoop whoop. Is that an expression here in Canada? In Australia, that means nowhere. Some God-forsaken place. I mean, spiritually. There's no mikveh, there's no yeshiva, there's no cheder, there's no friends, there's no from Jews that keep Shabbos, it's spiritual suicide. He said, the Rebbe did it. He says, he has broad shoulders. I can't do this. What's the secret? The secret is exactly that. If you're plugged into the Mordechai of the generation, there's only one Mordechai per generation. Our sages say that Mordechai, the generation, was equal to Moishe Rabbeinu of his time. He was the leader. So there were some sages, they're legitimate sages that separate us. We can't do this. You go ahead, we can't do it. We're going to leave the confines of Jerusalem, of the Sanhedrin, and interact with the world out there. It's going to have a negative influence on us. But Mordechai could do it, and did. And the Rebbe is saying that our generation, we have to do it. We have to do it. This is the call of our generation. The Rebbe is calling to scholars and rabbis. He's really, without saying it, you plug into Mordechai, plug into Lubavitch, plug into Chassidus in simple language. You plug into Chassidus, you'll have the strength and inspiration, not only not to be affected by a secular and corrupt and hedonistic environment, but you'll make a revolution there. And you'll turn it around. And as for your Torah study, your piety, you'll grow, you'll be blessed from it. You won't be compromised. For that, you got to be plugged into Mordechai. That's the secret of the Shluchim. The secret, it's not a secret, it's an open secret. The secret of the Shluchim is, it's Mordechai, and it's the teachings of Chassidus, which inspire, which stir the soul to its depth and give such fortitude and strength to come to a town where there's nothing, Yiddishkeit-wise, and then you come back to the Shliach, and 10 years later, where there's in Asia, where there's in some little town in mid-USA, or in Auckland, New Zealand, or in Melbourne, Australia, where I grew up. When it all started, there was nothing, not only there was nothing in Melbourne, but there was a Jewish community. Before the Lubavitchers came after the war, before my grandfather came and my mother, but they're antagonistic. The Lubavitchers came with beards. This is not, go back to Europe. Europe was decimated. So, where are you going to go? But there was a lot of opposition. The yeshivas, there's no yeshivas in Melbourne anymore. The day of the yeshiva is over. Beards. But they're plugged in. They're plugged into the previous Rebbe, to the Rebbe, the Mordechais of the generation, and it took time, but eventually they turned Australia into an oasis of Torah. And many other communities sprung up, not Chabad, but as a result of what Chabad did. As in the story of Mordechai, it's a majority. A minority remained, we can't do this. Go ahead, you do it, but we can't do it. There'll be some that can't, but the emphasis for our generation, that's what the Rebbe is calling here. Everybody, this is the call of the hour. But you can't go on your own. You go on your own, you'll be, you've got to be connected to Mordechai and the teachings. All right, so that is the message, the enduring message of the Megillah. It's the final word. And it's also implying the following, that even if there's going to be, which there is, right, some that will, no, this is not for us, etc., don't be disheartened. Not everybody's embracing this, not yet. But you have to plow ahead. And the Shluchim did, undeterred, despite all the criticism of outreach and non-religious Jews. And then, the Chabad, the Rebbe persisted. And what happened at the end? The end was that those very quarters of orthodoxy, and I remember them in the Litvischer world, etc., that were very opposed to what Chabad is doing. Putting tefillin on a non-religious Jew was blasphemy, was contaminating the tefillin, tremendous opposition. But over years and years and years and years, finally turned around and their attitude has changed. They started also Kiruv organizations, they Torah, and it all came from quarters that originally opposed on opposition. Of course, many of them are rewriting history. Oh, we always did it, but thank God it's not that long ago. So there's people that know. There's no secret. If anybody wants to be a little bit honest, but who cares what they say? As long as they're doing it. But I remember the opposition were who? And from even the Hasidic world, like, this is not the way. Many were just silent, go ahead, but they couldn't understand it. And some were were vociferous in their opposition. But most notably in the Lithuanian Torah world, the yeshiva world. The way to go is a kollel, not a Chabad house, was the rallying cry. Kollel means that we create our bastions of Torah. Somebody wants to join us, they're welcome, but put up strong walls. You create insular communities, Torah communities, towns, cities, if possible, where there's almost no interaction with the secular world. That was the attitude. But thank God that's all changed. The kollels themselves throughout the world have become like Chabad houses in many ways. So the emes, the truth, wins hearts at the end. A lot of work and a lot of heartache to get there, let me tell you. A lot of heartache, because the opposition comes from your colleagues. It's very painful. It's not the opposition of the time of Mordechai, where they just said it's good, but not for us. Here the opposition was, this is wrong. I'm trying to undermine the work. But Baruch Hashem, to a large degree, that's a thing of the past. And everybody now understands and embraced it to one degree or another. So this is the wonderful good news. Okay. That concludes basically the Sichel is whole lot more of it. Actually, we see, no, let's read together the last section. It's page 404, Yud. You see there, Yud, page 404. This is the instruction, the lesson, from the actions of Mordechai legabeinu for us lemaisa in practicality. Like the famous words of the Baal Shem Tov al Divrei HaMishnah. The Mishnah says in tractate Megillah, the person reads the Megillah, the entire Megillah, all 10 chapters, but he reads chapter 10 first, and then chapter 9, and so on. He did not fulfill the obligation. He must read it in chronological order. That's the simple meaning of the Mishnah. The Baal Shem Tov taught. The meaning is if you read the Megillah backwards, meaning you read the Megillah like it's an old story. That's the simple Megillah Mafreya. I just told you the halachic, the simple meaning of the Mishnah, what backwards means, but Baal Shem Tov gives a deeper, subtle insight into the message of the Mishnah. Someone who reads the Mishnah backwards, meaning it's a story which happened, but there's no relevance to my life. So the Mishnah is saying, Misha Kedis and Megillah Techistaklos, if the attitude to the story of the Megillah is, next page, Kilu, Mesupaba, Al Mu'ura, She'ida, Ba'ovar, it's like a story that happened in the past. The Mafreya ve'enle kesher but has no present connection. La yotza, he did not fulfill his obligation. He missed the point. The message of the Megillah, he has to understand, is current and immediate and now. And therefore, Rebbe concludes this wonderful teaching Nidreshes meitonu, it's demanded from us. Hisnagus, the conduct. Hashemen darkish Mordechai, following in the example and inspiration of Mordechai. We all have to be Elias. That's the final words of the Megillah. We all have to be Elias Mishneh LaMelech. We've got to be the second to the king, meaning to say involved in all matters that affect the Jewish people. These are the final words of the Megillah. Doirish toiv lama in italics, seeking out the welfare of his people, actively seeking out, not praying and hoping things will be good. Involved in the halls of government if necessary. Doirish shalom l'chol zarek, and was a spokesman of peace for all of his seed, even those who said we can't do this. Even that means he's not popular with all of his colleagues. Even though this means it's a descent, a personal descent, from the time they could devote to Torah study in their own family, in their own community. They have to compromise their own personal perfection. So be it. It's worth this descent for the welfare of the many of your fellow Jew. And the Rebbe adds, the truth is, this is everybody's story in the most intimate way, in the square brackets. This is your story. Why? You have a neshama. And what happened to your soul? In italics, neshmasa, you read as the soul descended from the loftiest heights, the bitter amikta to this deep pit, which is this world. Why does the neshama stay in Gan Eden? Your birth is actually reflective of this great mission. Why did you come down? In order to engage the body and the animal soul, and engage the world, the kaivsham to conquer them, and to make them all an abode, a dwelling for God. So we're not asking something that's foreign to you. Your very life in this world was, to begin with, that's all part of this great mission. Your soul descended from on high, from Gan Eden, from paradise, in order to engage and elevate the body and the world. Moreover, as soon you got married, you had to leave the halls of the yeshiva to one degree or another, and now his wife and children, again, a so-called descent. For what? To embrace and engage another Jew. So in addition to just being born, your soul came down. In the words of the Megillah, it's called Ishayr B'Beis, at the beginning, that Achashverosh enacted a law that a person be the leader of his house. That was negative. He would mean in a positive way, in brackets. As our sages say, who is the virtuous woman? Who does the will of her husband? On a deeper level, it means she makes the will of her husband. But the point is, to be involved in family life and so on, it's just another descent. As our sages say, he descends from his level and he marries. Descend and marry. What does marry mean? There's other people in your life you've got to be responsible for. A wife brings children into the world. As he concludes the brackets, a person has to forego his personal perfection for the welfare of his home. Instead of saying, we're not asking for you something that is not part and parcel of your whole identity. Your soul came down to the world. You have to get married. It doesn't stop here now. Now go out in the world and be like Mordechai and seek out the welfare of your fellow Jews. Seek him out and put on tefillin with him. Leave the comforts of your home and go to a place which is spiritually undeveloped. I reminded, you may have seen this because I have it on the, go online afterwards. You know what, I'll post a link. I'll post a link. In 1960, when JFK came out with a Peace Corps, I think it was 1960. 1960. He announced a Peace Corps where they're going to send for a year or two It's a volunteer, that Americans should volunteer to go to underdeveloped countries and live there and help the local population. Huh? So I'm telling you what he said. He said it was a Purim Verbrengen. And they said it's years now we're speaking about this. It's 1960, friends. You have to understand, it's just after the war, and people were just happy to have survived and create Jewish communities. And they was talking about changing the world. This is such a revolution beyond. And it took a long time for them to get through to Lubavitch. And then decades to get through to the rest of the Torah world. With a lot of heartache. So the Rebbe was saying that we're speaking now for years that a person shouldn't convince himself that he wants to stay here in these 4 cubits with the Crown Heights or the Barapaka, Williamsburg, or Jerusalem, wherever it is. And here he's going to live his life in tranquility and grow. And we're saying that, no, you got to pick up and go. Shlichus. This is 1960, friends. This was and they go to towns and cities throughout the world where they're spiritually undeveloped. They don't know from Allah base, they don't know from Yiddishkeit, and moreover, they don't even know that they're missing anything. And you should go there for a year or 2 or 10, for as long as you're needed, and you'll eat what they eat, and you'll be part of their society. You're not better than them. Bist besser von sie. And you're not going there for money or glory. This is all a volunteer organization. So this is what the Rebbe said. So my words are, I'm speaking, and so what did Hashem do? Hashem sent a message that the hearts, our sages say that the hearts of kings and princes in the hands of God, they're all pawns in God's plan. What's happening today, Hashem is moving the pieces. So the President of the United States comes out with this call. It's a reflection of the heavenly call. It's like you're getting a message from here in the world. Which has to stop whoa! It's a message coming from the president, which means it's orchestrated from above. Malka Shaloilam. In other words, the Rebbe is saying, just like in the Megillah, our sages say, wherever it says the word Melech, it's a reference to God. Even though it's referring to Achashverosh, on this level, it's hinting to, because Hashem is orchestrating it all. So too, presidents and prime ministers and what they do, it's Hashem's message. This is coming. It's a cruise. From the King of the world, from Hashem himself. Go out. So it's a beautiful talk. I'm going to send you the link. The Living Torah. Jim Video has it. We have the translation at the bottom. It was 1960. So let's conclude over here. Let's conclude. The Rebbe says an amazing thing. But this is the explanation that we're saying now, that you have to be like Mordechai and leave, close your Gemara and pick up and go. So this is the answer we find. We find that those involved in communal matters have a special law. Even greater than ones who their whole life is exclusively for Torah study. The law is like this, an amazing halacha. Everything the Rebbe says, it's on one hand, it's a revolution. On the other hand, it's all rooted in the halacha and in the Megillah and Mordechai. Even though it seems like it's a change, outreach, kiruv, they never did this, never saw this. It's all here. So what's the halacha? The law is that someone whose entire occupation is Torah study, so there are many mitzvahs that they're exempt from doing because they're studying Torah. But they have to stop for Shema. When the time of Shema comes, you got to stop learning and recite the Shema. However, if you're involved at that time in something for the community, you don't stop even to say the Shema. Because Shalamra is that even though even though in their which is quoting here from the tefillah, we say the Yom Purkan that we say Misha Beirach every Shabbos, faithful not glory seekers, not attention seekers, publicity seekers. Not talking about that kind of community work, but real, be'emunah, faithful. It means you get involved in the lives of people and intimately, etc., etc. So nifgoyim limod ha'torah b'shleimus atzmis. So that takes off time and it takes away from his own Torah study, his own prayer, his own elevation, etc. Kedivri Chazal, as it says, "Hataleim tzorchi tzibav in kol maleim." That's a whole story there with Eldad and Meidad in Parshas B'Shalach. I'm sorry, in Parshas Shlach, Parshas Ba'aloischa. That Yeshua felt that they were disrespectful to Moishe, and Yeshua tells Moishe Rabbeinu, make them community workers, and that'll take care of them, of their aspirations for piety and prophecy. We see from there that being involved in communal work diminishes one's spiritual perfection. The whole Zeis, nonetheless, do it. It's all worth it to reach out to your fellow Jew, even if your prophetic level is going to be compromised, as in the story there with Yeshua and Eldad and Meidad and Moishe Rabbeinu and Parshas Ba'aloischa. And now he's bringing out that the fact that he's exempt from saying the Shema while he's doing this means that he's holding by the level of Shema. He's holding by that through his connection, because of his devotion to his fellow Jew, to the community work, to the community need. Final paragraph. And if such a conduct was demanded from Mordechai to save the Jewish people, it was a question there of the physical salvation. That was the story of Haman, of Purim. Much more so, is this what we're talking about now, leaving and going out and leaving the comforts of the Torah environment and of the big Jewish communities and going out and reaching out to fellow Jews and devoting our lives to that? How much more so? We're talking about the spiritual, the soul, which means the very survival of the Jewish people, period. So someone has, it's a demand of us is to levata, means to let go, as it were, on personal growth and personal study and personal accumulation of knowledge. Lamanat solas nefosha is to save another neshama, another yid. It says about Mordechai, to be a spokesman of peace for all of his seed, all of his fellow Jews. And we have to go out there to inspire tshuva amongst all of our fellow Jews. And miyadeni golan, as the Rambam says, when Yidden do tshuva, they'll be redeemed immediately, b'korev mamish, very soon. So the amazing thing is, what's the conclusion? That the final pasuk of the Megillah is, what is it telling you? Got to be a shliach. Got to be like Mordechai. To be those that are critical, legitimately, so be it. Those that can't, so be it. But if you're plugged into Mordechai, that's the call of the hour. To be a seeker of, and seek means go out there, the welfare, physically, spiritually, of every Jew, wherever they may be. And then this, of course, brings about the whole, which did and is happening, Baruch Hashem, the whole Hisoidus, the whole the Teshuvah movement that Baruch Hashem is sweeping the Jewish world, the renaissance of Jewish life, Torah life, everywhere, Baruch Hashem. And that will result in Mashiach's coming without delay. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, dear friends, next Sunday, God willing, we'll have our class from Potomac Village.
Pesach.
And we'll start
Pesach.
We'll start learning about Pesach, exactly. Very
awesome.
Good.
Shkoyach, Rabbi.
Shkoyach, have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
See you soon at 10:15.